Baldur's Gate is home to wealthy nobles, desperate criminals, and brutal mercenaries. It's a den of corruption, where everything and everyone has a price, and where even the most hardened of adventurers will watch their step. Over the years, Baldur's Gate has given its name to some of the best video games in history, and is of course the setting for the upcoming Baldur's Gate 3, and the starting point for the D&D adventure Descent into Avernus. So let's take a tour of the most notorious city on the Sword Coast. Baldur's Gate began life as a hidden harbour, where traders could meet in secret with pirates from across the region. The bend in the river made for a secure harbour, and was also far enough away from the coast that the criminals could sell their ill-gotten gains without fear of meeting the original owners. As this illicit business grew more profitable, traders began to put down roots, and a town called Grey Harbour emerged, drawing its name from the region's frequent fog and its residents' rather shady reputations. Years later, a great explorer named Baldur returned to the harbour, following a very profitable expedition, and he began to spread around a great deal of wealth, some of which was spent on having a wall constructed around the town. Yet the community continued to grow, and eventually ended up with two distinct regions: the upper city, which was within the walls and populated by wealthy families known as patriarchs, and the lower city, which spread from the wall down to the harbour, and consisted mainly of peasants, shopkeepers, sailors and labourers. It wasn't long before Baldur departed again, but this time he never returned. However, his gate-dotted wall remained, and soon became an effective way for the upper city to charge taxes on goods coming into their markets. Of course, this didn't sit very well with Baldur's fellow seafaring captains, to whom the lower city and the harbour was home, and they insisted that the southern gate, through which traffic from the harbour would enter the city, was Baldur's Gate, and they refused to pay for its use. Eventually, this conflict resulted in the lower city overthrowing the rich traders and seizing control of the upper city for themselves, before appointing the four older ship captains as the city's rulers. Not long after this, the Flaming Fist was also founded, when the various mercenary companies from within the city were united under a single banner. Over the coming years, the city continued to grow, and the upper and lower cities became more and more entwined, eventually resulting in new walls being built that would protect the lower city as well. This brings you up to around the time that the original video games were set, but over the decades since then, the city has extended even beyond these new walls, as businesses blocked from operating within the city instead huddle outside the walls and along the trade roads, forming the lawless and uncontrolled Outer City, which you will find in Baldur's Gate 3, Murder at Baldur's Gate, and Descent into Avernus. These three districts, the Upper, Lower and Outer City, are all part of Baldur's Gate, but couldn't be more different from one another. The Upper City exudes wealth in every way imaginable. Its streets are wide, clean, and flowering plants decorate the windows and walls of noble estates, giving the air a delicate scent, and any form of smelly business is entirely banned from the city so as not to spoil the aroma. Magnificent buildings like the Hall of Wonders and High Hall serve as landmarks, while the sprawling marketplace known as the Wide is packed with stalls selling luxuries from across the continent and beyond. The patriarchs who live here are unashamed of their snobbery and go to great lengths to maintain an appearance of exorbitant wealth, and they make sure the City Watch are ruthless about barring the poor from setting foot in the district. Which leads me on to the lower city, which serves as the heart of Baldur's Gate's trade industry. Labourers, sailors, shopkeepers and fine artisans, whose work doesn't produce a foul stench or excessively loud noises, live and work within this labyrinth of small buildings. Commerce is king here, and there are many opportunities to make gold both within and outside of the law. Notably, this law is not enforced by the City Watch in the lower district, and instead, the protection of its citizens is left in the hands of the Flaming Fist mercenary company. The Flaming Fist has prospered since it was established long ago, and they are deeply entwined with the city's leadership, with their highest ranking officer usually one of the four dukes who runs the city. However, even with their presence, crime is still common in the lower city, thanks to an organisation known as the Guild. Uniting killers, cut purses, loan sharks, thugs and thieves, the Guild operates throughout the city, but the lower city is the heart of their operations. Here, the locals are wealthy enough to pay for protection or throw away their money gambling, and access to the harbour and outer city makes smuggling and trafficking much easier. In general, the lower city is foggy, cramped and dangerous, but it's still a haven compared to what lies beyond its walls. Known as the Outer City, this district didn't exist during the original Baldur's Gate games, but by the time of the more recent book releases and Baldur's Gate 3, this sprawling web of tanneries, blacksmiths, slaughterhouses and dung heaps has grown out along the walls and roads. Law enforcement is almost non-existent, and even the guild only has a very slight interest in the region, seeing as most of the residents are so poor they're not even worth mugging. Although the twisted mess of streets does provide ample opportunity to ambush visitors on their way to the city. Many of these visitors will come from Worm's Crossing, two enormous bridges that each span half of the river, meeting in the middle on Worm's Rock, where the Flaming Fist maintains a fortress to tax incoming travellers. The bridge itself is filled with squatters in wooden shacks, crumbling taverns and dishevelled shops, many of which actually cling to the side of the bridge itself and have a tendency to fall into the water below. Still, these challenges lead to closely knit communities where you live and die by your reputation, and while criminal activity is common, it's important to remember that most of the people in the Outer City are just trying to survive. The worship of evil gods is not outlawed in Baldur's Gate, so long as the acts of your worship do not hurt anyone of importance in the city or disrupt trade. Most of the well-established centres of worship can be found in the Upper City, and the gods worshipped there are well known and generally respectable. However, I would be remiss not to talk about the Dead Three. Individually known as Bane, Baal and Merkel, the Dead Three were once mortal adventurers, but over time they amassed enough power to claim their own divine domains. Bane became the god of tyranny and strife, Merkel the god of death and undeath, and Baal claimed the title of the god of murder. However, during an event known as the Time of Troubles, all three of them were killed, but even death couldn't truly stop them, and they each managed to live on through their own individual schemes. Today, Merkel and Bane see some worship, but undoubtedly Baal has the biggest impact on the city, most of which you can experience in the story of the first Baldur's Gate game. In short, and with as few spoilers as possible, Baal foresaw his death before the Time of Troubles, so devised a plan to cheat his own demise. He sired countless mortal children known as Baalspawn, and each of them carried a sliver of his divine essence. The Baalspawn were involved in many conflicts throughout the Sword Coast, with Baldur's Gate often at the epicentre, but the plan for Baldur to return through his children was eventually thwarted, yet this was far from enough to put an end to the worship of the Lord of Murder. It's up for debate whether it's Baal's influence that turns people in Baldur's Gate into killers, or if it was the constant killing that drew his attention in the first place. But no matter what period of time your visit to Baldur's Gate takes place, the Dead Three and their followers will likely have some influence over the city. And when their symbols begin to appear, you can be sure that trouble will soon follow. This has been a brief introduction to Baldur's Gate, but if you're looking for more information about what the city may be like in Baldur's Gate 3, I recommend checking out Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, available now on D&D Beyond, the link is in the description. For now though, I've been James for Fandom, and thank you for watching.